welcome to Mr. Otter's Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to do Coptic bookbinding to turn this pad of watercolor paper into this sketchbook. And the sketchbook's awesome, it lays flat. Also, this is the watercolor paper that Mr. Otter Studio sells. On our website, there's 30 sheets inside of it, so when we fold the sheets, we end up with a sketchbook with 120 pages if you use both sides. Head on over to Mr. Otter Studio. You can actually buy 2 of these and watercolor brushes, but any watercolor pad will do. You can also just use normal paper, but I'm going to show you how to convert this watercolor pad into this sketchbook. These are the supplies that you need. You need a pad of watercolor paper. The second thing that you need is a cutting mat. You also need a ruler to make some of the marks. Wax thread, choose whatever color you want. There's a lot of colors available on Amazon. You need a needle. So this is just a sewing needle that I have. It's fairly big. So I feel like the bigger ones are a lot easier to use for this technique. You need an awl. So this is to press the holes through your paper. Be careful with this, it's really sharp. An X-Acto knife. This is going to be just for cutting the cover of the book. And a bone folder. Bone folders are great. They make the folds really, really nice and crisp. And a pencil. So this will be just for making marks on the paper. So pretty basic supplies. You just might need to buy maybe the wax thread and maybe an awl if you don't have that. Step number 1, remove the paper from the watercolor paper pad. Step number 2, open it and tear off the cover so that we can use the back of it for the front and back cover of our sketchbook. And don't worry if there's a little bit of glue or you've torn it a little bit when you took that off, because we can just cover that up with binding and we'll keep it on the inside of our book. Step number 2 is to create the cover of your sketchbook. And what you want to do is take the back of your sketchbook, you've taken the cover off, taken the paper off, and you're left with this like cardboard type part of the sketchbook, that hard piece that's on the back. Measure the back part of your paper pad so that it's in half. This paper is 9 by 12 inches, and so 12 inches is the length, so I'm going to divide that in half, so it's 6. So I'm making 3 marks at 6 inches. Measure that so you can cut it in half and have even sides on the front and the back. Make your marks and then cut it so you have the front and the back of your sketchbook and they are the same size. Okay, so you have the front and the back of your sketchbook, and I'm gonna make sure I keep this part that is kind of torn inside of the back cover so that you can't see it. The next step is going to be creating our folios. So folios are basically individual folded pages. So we're going to be taking each of these pages, using our bone folder, and folding them in half. I like to just use my bone folder, press it in the middle, and then go up and down, creating a nice crisp fold. I also wanted to include what it looks like if you don't use the bone folder. So the one that I use the bone folder with is really crisp and nice and lays flat together, and the one I just folded using my finger doesn't work quite as well. You can also use a ruler to create that nice crisp edge. Also, if you had a chance to see Little Women, it's kind of cool. It looks like they're doing Coptic bookbinding in that the new movie. This is the year 2020. Stack all of your folios together. Step number 4 is to create your signatures. So these are going to be sets of your folios that are placed together. So basically 4 folded papers that you place together, or in my case, I just did 2. I actually experimented with it. In one of these books, I have 3 papers in my signatures, and in the one that I'm showing you today, I have 2. So this is kind of the difference between the 2 of those. This is with 3, and this is with 2. It's much easier to sew these together if you only have 2. If you're using paper that's not as thick as watercolor paper, you could make a signature using 4 to 6 pages inside of it. So place them together, make sure they're nice and even. Step number 5 is to mark the signatures. We're going to be marking where the holes are going to be going through, where we're going to be doing the stitches. And I like to make 6 holes. I'm making mine at 1 inches, 2 inches, 3 inches, and then again at 7 inches, 8 inches, and 9 inches. The less holes you have, the looser it's gonna be, and the more of them, the tighter it's going to be. 6 has worked really well for me. Now you wanna stack all of your signatures together. Use your ruler to make a line at all of those measurements. You wanna make sure that you're 1 inch from the bottom of the page and 1 inch from the top of the page. So just use your pencil and you're going to use the ruler and you're just gonna draw up the side of the signatures, making sure you've stacked them very tightly together. Stack your signatures, make sure they're tightly together, and use your ruler to mark all of the signatures at once. And make sure you're marking the side that is not open, but the folded side, the closed side. Step number 6 is to create the binding holes, and we're going to create them in the signatures and also in the cover. So grab your cover and one of your marked signatures, and you want to place it back about an inch from the spine. So I'm just using my ruler to mark that out. Make a line if you want to, or just put it there, and then use your pencil to mark where the holes are going to be. So they're just going to correspond with those marks that we made on the signatures. So at 1, 2, and 3 inches, and then again at 7, 8, and 9 inches. After you've made those marks, you want to just grab your awl and press a hole through each one of those marks. The wider it is, the easier it is to sew it together. Then grab your other cover, making sure you're placing them together so it would be like the insides are touching or the outsides are touching. However you decided to mark it, just keep it consistent. Place it over your next cover, and then you can actually just use your awl and go straight through those holes that you've already made and put them into the back side of your cover or the other cover. And then once you can see all of those marks, then use the awl to press them through. Okay, then grab all of your signatures, open them up, and then use your awl to make holes in each of the signatures where you've made those marks. And these are going to be the binding holes. Grab your back and your front cover, place all of it together, and now we are going to sew it together. Step number 7 is to thread your needle. This is hard for some of us. For me, you want to make this long enough that you can sew a few of these together, maybe 3 or 4 or 5. But you don't want to make it too long or it gets really tangled. So I kind of use the length from end of my fingers to end of my fingers. And it's doubled, so it's double threaded. So bring one side through, pull it together, and then you're just going to tie a knot in the end of it. So it looks like this. Grab your back cover and the back signature, your needle and your thread, and we're going to start to sew it together. So step number 8 is to stitch our sketchbooks together. So you're going to start at the bottom of the first signature, and you're going to bring your thread through the inside through that bottom hole that you've made. So you're going to sew from the inside out, then you're going to wrap it around the back side of your cover through that back lower hole, pull it through, and it can be a little bit awkward to kind of get used to this. And as you can see, the thread will start to kind of tangle a little bit if it's really long, but you don't want to have to keep rethreading. And don't worry, you don't need to make it long enough to sew your whole book together with one thing of thread. It's super easy to get more thread and to make a knot. So anyway, now tighten the signature to the back cover. Now you're going to bring the needle around. You're just going to bring it around itself. So you're bringing it from behind that signature and all the way around, just making a loop. And then you're bringing it back through that hole into the middle of the signature. Then you're going to move over, bring your thread and your needle through that second hole from the bottom and out. And you're going to repeat the same thing that you just did. So you're going to pull it through out of the middle of that signature to the back side, making sure that you've pulled it kind of tight. You don't want to have a big loop in there. It makes it a little bit harder. Bring it around the back side of your book, so through the back cover. Pull it all the way through, and then bring it through that space in between the signature and the back cover. And then you need to loop it around. So I like to stay on the same side. So I'm starting these on the right side, looping around the left. Then bring it back through on the right side of that stitch. Tighten it so you pull the signature to the back cover, and then you want to, don't tighten it too much though, or you'll tear the paper, which I've done. Be gentle. Then you're going to bring that thread through the same hole back into the middle of the signature. And don't worry, really the complicated parts of sewing this, I feel like, are the back cover and the top cover, but once you sew on these next signatures, it gets really easy and you kind of get in a groove. So bring it over into the next hole. So remember there's 3. So this is the third from the bottom. We're bringing it through from the middle of the signature out. And then just like you did before, loop it around through the back cover, then bring it through that signature, the middle of the signature and the back cover. I'm just gonna fast forward this and just show that. So through the back cover, then down through the middle, or you can just kind of go from the side. I'm keeping it consistent and trying to bring it back through the right side or the left, depending on how you're looking at it, of that signature. You're gonna do the same thing, loop it around itself. So loop it around that stitch and then bring it back through the hole that you used before, that you came out through. And meanwhile, just keep checking and making sure that your thread is tight and you don't have any loose ends. They're much easier to fix if they are recent, I've learned. Bring it right back through itself. Then you're gonna skip over and you're gonna start with the third one down from the top. I'm taking longer to explain this part just because I feel like this can be the most complicated thing. But you're basically going to do the same thing with these next 3 stitches. The only difference is when you get to the very last one, so the one that's down 1 from the top, instead of going back into the signature, you're going to add your next signature and go into that one. So I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so now we are at the last stitch or the last hole on the signature until we get to the end. So what we're going to do is the same thing we did on the ones before. We're going to stick it through the back cover, bring it down through the middle of the cover and that last signature. Then you're going to loop it around that stitch, and this is where the difference is. So we've looped it around. Now normally we would take it back through that hole, right up into that signature, but now we're going to add our next signature, and we're going to take it through the hole of the next signature. Grab your next signature, and instead of going through that same hole, we're going to come right through the hole of the next signature. And then you're just going to go start moving over to the next hole down from the top. And in this one, we don't have the back cover to loop it around. So instead, you're going to loop it around the stitch that's in the signature before this one. So you're going to skip down, go back in between the signature and the cover, and loop it around that second stitch down from the top, and then bring it back up through that same signature into the middle of that signature. Also, if it gets confusing, all of these steps and everything that I'm saying, there is a great just pictures and words tutorial on how to do this on WikiHow. So I think that their pictures, at least they helped me when I kind of forgot some of these steps that I learned when I was in college. So I learned how to do this when I was in college, and I would forget some of the steps. So I honestly used this WikiHow article, and it was super helpful. So maybe you want to use a mixture of both so you can kind of see it being done in a video, but also the steps written out. And they have really cool pictures showing how this works. So we're just going to bring it right back through that signature. So you were looping it, instead of looping it around the back cover, we're looping it around the stitch that's in between the back cover and that signature. You're going to do the same exact thing with these next 2 stitches, and when you get to the end, you're going to do the same thing you did before. Instead of bringing it into the same signature, you're going to grab a new signature and bring it up into that one. And that's how you're going to attach the next layer of signatures to your book. Okay, so we've looped it around itself, and now instead of bringing it into the same signature, we're going to bring it into the next signature. So the bottom hole of this next signature, just right up through the hole that we've already made. Make sure you tighten it so that signature lays flat against the next signature. Bring it down through the next hole. And then this is where I wanted to just make sure to slow it down so you can see what to loop it around. Because once you understand this, it'll be a lot easier for you to stitch all of the next signatures on. So I'm bringing it in between the one that was before it and the one that was before that. So right here. So that signature is the back signature. And the signature, so take it around that stitch, back through, tighten it up, and then bring it right back through the same hole that you used to get to this place. Bring it back through and then over, and then you're going to come back down through the next hole, just like we did before. Next, I'm going to show you what happens when you run out of thread, because it will happen to you. If it doesn't, I'm super impressed that you can sew with that much thread. So watch what I'm doing. I'm just going to tie a knot right here, and that's going to keep this together. So just pull it pretty tight, not so tight you rip your paper. Pull it and then just cut it. Thread your next needle, kind of tuck that stitch under. You can do this at the end as well. And all you're going to do is grab a new thread, do the same thing you did before, tie the end in a knot, and you're just going to start in that next hole. So I always like to end like at the bottom section or the top section. I usually just like to end at the end of this bottom section, but you could really do it however. The key is just making sure all of these signatures stay together and that they are attached to the front cover and the back cover. And if you've done that, then you did a great job. Also remember, the more string you use, the longer your string is, I feel like the harder it is to sew these together. But the less times you have to stop and rethread, even though it's not really that big of a problem. Now you're going to continue doing this until you get to that top cover. And if you get a little seasick, then you might not want to watch this part, because for some reason, watching me make this in fast motion makes me feel a little bit nauseous. All right, now when you have one signature left, this is when you want to stop, and we're going to do something a little bit different. So instead of coming into this next signature, you're going to skip over it and come in through the hole on the outside of that cover. So this is pretty similar to what we did when we started. The only difference is instead of going into the signature that this thread came out of, you're going to be going into the one that's in between them. So pull the cover tight so that it fits against those signatures. And just like we did before, loop it around that itself, essentially. Just go loop it around. Make sure you pull it tight so that it matches the back. And then you're going to bring it through that last signature. So through the bottom hole on that last signature. Once you get it through, you're going to bring it back through the next hole in that signature, the second one from the bottom, pull it through, and then do the same thing you did on the front one. Bring it around the front side of your cover and back through that hole. So you're bringing it around the cover, in through that outside hole, then you're going to loop it around itself and bring it up through that signature, the same signature that we just came out of in the same hole that we just came out of. And while you're sewing, I think it's easy just to make those loops on the same side and come out on that same side. So we're bringing it down, looping it around that stitch that was made before and back through the signature. Making sure to kind of pull it so it tightens up. You're basically just pulling it so that cover matches up. Really bring it back through that same hole. Bring it back up through itself and then over into the next hole that's 3 up from the bottom. Then you guessed it, you're going to loop it around the back cover. Bring it through the middle of the signature and the front cover, sorry. Okay, so now you're going to bring it in between the middle of the signature that was below it and the one that was below that one. Loop it around and bring it back through the middle of that last signature, and then you're going to continue doing the same thing until you get to the end. And when you get to the very last stitch, you're going to tie a knot. And I actually make a pretty big mistake here, so let me just get to it so I can record the audio. So when I did my last stitch, I pulled it way too tight and I ripped the paper so you can see it. Yeah, that was bad. It was a bad moment. I should have been more careful, but I decided to just try to work with it. And so basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring it back through the cover, bring it down, and then when I make my last loop around, I'm trying to pull that thread over, and also when I tie the knot, I'm gonna try to lift that thread up so that you cannot see it on my spine, because I think Coptic bookbinding, the spines are just so beautiful, and to mess up the symmetry that's already there really doesn't look great. So I'm just gonna try to use the stitches before to kind of pull that over a little bit. So don't worry, if you make this mistake, you can kind of fix it a little bit. So I'm just bringing it between the signature that was before it and the one that was before that one and around. And then you'll see when I come back through how I try to fix this. So just bring it around that last stitch, then up through the middle of that signature, which I now have this huge hole because I tore it. Don't worry. So you can see how my thread is falling through that signature. So what I'm gonna do is try to tie this last knot so that it brings it up. And if you didn't make that mistake, good for you. Yours probably look way better than mine, and that is awesome. So I'm just bringing it under and trying to move that thread up and over before I tie my knot. And I need to be careful because I don't want to tear it again, which I could easily do that. Then cut it and you're finished. So go through your book and fold those extra pieces of string that are kind of hanging around, fold them under themselves, and you're finished. I hope you enjoy the sketchbook. I hope you can take it on many adventures, or just that adventure you have right in your room, in your kitchen, wherever you draw, wherever you paint. Sitting on the bus, sitting at the park, sitting in your car. Thanks for watching this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. This is definitely one of the more step-heavy tutorials that I've made, but I really love this method, and honestly, Coptic bookbinding is just, I think it's such a fun thing to do. And anyway, and I think these make great gifts as well. So anyway, that is what it looks like. That's what my mistake looks like after I finished it. You can see here, here's the one that I have that had signatures with 3 pages. That's the one that is orange. And then the one that had 2 pages each is the one that I use the red thread. So you can kind of see the difference. I feel like the signatures with less papers inside of them, it actually stays closed a little bit better. But I also didn't bind it as tight. You can kind of tell, like, it's not as tight together. And you can actually make kind of something to keep it closed. Some people will put like ribbons that they've attached. Some people decorate the covers with cloth. It looks really cool. You can definitely do that. The possibilities are endless. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this with me, and I hope you have a wonderful day.